Amazing moment. Lonely CEO exposes hidden generosity by buying 50 worth of diapers for broke dad. Jack stood in the dimly lit grocery store, rain pounding against the glass like the relentless doubts swirling in his mind. He pushed his cart, the flimsy wheels squeaking, holding only the essentials: milk, bread, and the last remnants of his dwindling paycheck. With every step, he felt the weight of his circumstances bearing down, the reminder of a recent divorce creeping in like a shadow. How had he ended up here, dragging a cart through a local store, dressed in a worn-out hoodie, while his newborn son, Ben, awaited him at their cramped apartment, their one-bedroom prison? He paused in the baby aisle, eyes locking onto the rows of neatly stacked diapers, the price tags a stark reminder of his depleted funds. Frustrated, he dug into his pocket, fingers brushing against crumpled bills. Count them. 1, 2, 3. His heart sank with each number, the total a cruel reflection of his circumstances. He could buy milk for Ben or diapers, one necessity versus another. His pride screamed at him, desperate to keep his head above water, but the reality was unforgiving. He needed help. Jack wrestled with his decision. Rachel, a successful CEO, strolled into the same aisle, seeking to escape the weight of her own solitude. Though she had a thriving tech startup, the loneliness loomed large, an ever-present companion that haunted the corners of her life. She felt the soft pull of empathy as she spotted Jack, a single father lost in his thoughts. Their eyes met, and for a split second, the world around them faded. "Can I help you?" Rachel asked, the question escaping before her mind could catch up. The unexpected offer hung in the air between them, fraught with a delicate tension, her privilege against his struggle. Jack hesitated, his instinct to refuse rising like bile in his throat. "I can't." Couldn't he accept charity, and couldn't he admit that he was faltering? But the weight of his pride paled in comparison to the hunger gnawing at his gut. The tension crackled as he grappled with the primal instincts of a father. Here was a stranger, perhaps even a benefactor, yet all he wanted to do was protect his muddied sense of pride while ensuring Ben had what he needed. In the charged air, whispers of Rachel's impending doom slid through the store: a loss due to corporate greed, lawsuits looming large over her head. Irony dripped from the situation. Here was a woman who held the perceived power of success unraveling behind her. Jack shared in her vulnerability. They were at a crossroads, caught in a world that valued perception over reality. Each faced their respective labyrinth: a working father attached to the remnants of pride, and a CEO grappling with isolation. The raw honesty forged a connection, with palpable tension thickening around them. Jack's thoughts raced as he fought with his inner demons of pride versus necessity, while Rachel's hands clenched involuntarily around the special brand of diapers she vowed to buy. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But just as a sliver of understanding thawed the frost of their circumstances, Rachel's phone buzzed, the ominous notification drawing her attention. The world outside their isolated moment beckoned back. Jack felt the air shift, tension escalating as the reality of their lives threatened to unspool everything they navigated in that baby aisle. Would he accept her help? Could she face another day of corporate criticism? In that fleeting moment, hope tangled with dread, leaving their futures sorrowfully uncertain. Jack felt his heart race as Rachel's attention diverted abruptly to her buzzing phone, a sharp reminder of the unforgiving world they resided in. The moment hung heavily in the air, charged with unspoken possibilities. Could he really allow her to help him? Those crumpled bills in his pocket burned against his palm, reminding him that accepting charity felt like admitting defeat. The grocery store aisle transformed into a battleground of ideologies, pride crashing against the basic instinct to provide for his child. Rachel's eyes flicked between the screen and Jack, her face a mixture of concern and determination. She knew the stakes of her own situation were spiraling out of control as external pressures mounted. Behind the facade of her high-powered life was a growing fear that her missteps could lead to collapse, a reminder that success is often an illusion, wavering on the brink. As a tech CEO, she had maneuvered the intricacies of industry politics. But this connection with Jack forced her to confront a side of humanity she often ignored in her corporate world. "Are you okay?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack felt exposed under her scrutiny. He took a step backward, slowly shaking his head as if to gather himself. The weight of his situation pressed against his chest. He could hear Ben's cries through the wall of his mind, a reminder that he didn't just owe it to himself to keep afloat. He owed it to Ben. Why couldn't he set aside this pride that felt more like shackles than a badge of honor? I can't, he replied, his voice unexpectedly strained. The words came out like futile gestures against the tide of reality. Rachel regarded him thoughtfully, then resolutely placed the pack of diapers in his cart, her hands brushing briefly against his. "Consider it an investment," she offered, a subtle flicker of vulnerability creeping into her tone. The phrase hung in the air. Investment. It was more than just a monetary transaction. It was a revelation that struck a chord deep within Jack's psyche. Accepting her help might not define him as a failure, but rather as someone willing to allow support into his life. Suddenly, the walls he'd erected around himself began to show signs of cracks. Jack stared at the diapers, then looked back at Rachel. The duality of their existence, her confidence and his despair, spoke to their common struggle. Beneath her polished exterior, did Rachel know what it felt like to be powerless? In that moment, Jack realized the depth of their relationship was more significant than he had anticipated. They were mere fragments of the same story, piecing together a broader narrative of survival. "You're going to donate this away, aren't you?" Jack asked quietly, his skepticism bubbling through a facade of resignation. "No, I'm going to help you," Rachel replied firmly, the resolve in her voice unmistakable. Underneath the surface, she too was fighting to reclaim her reality, an effort to find human connection beyond the sterile boardroom presentations and endless deadlines. This brief moment carried weight, forging a link neither could ignore. Fear and hesitation still clenched at Jack's gut. What did it mean to take that step? As he stared at Rachel, a sense of determination began to replace his instinct to withdraw. This could be the turning point, an opportunity not just to survive, but to rebuild. Jack had to choose: continue down the path defined by past mistakes, or take a risk on the road to redemption, an unpredictable journey that laid beyond the peeling paint of his everyday reality. But could he? Would he? With those questions swirling in his mind, Jack felt the air shift once again. Rachel's phone buzzed once more, shattering the moment, pulling them back to the harsh truths of the world outside. He would either confront his fears or let them dictate his path. Before he could find the answer, Jack's heart raced with the realization he had to decide. The moment lay before him, the echoes of uncertainty reverberating against the backdrop of his reality. The choice was just the beginning. What followed would test everything he had left. The time had come to face the ultimate decision. Would he dare to open the door to vulnerability and all its possibilities? The silence hung between them, charged with unresolved tension and the weight of unvoiced decisions. Jack let out a shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair, the rapid-fire thoughts in his mind colliding like bumper cars. Beneath the veneer of resilience, he was a man on the edge of a precipice. What did it mean to accept help, to surrender that last vestige of self-reliance? The stakes felt insurmountable. Rachel's phone buzzed again. He couldn't help but wonder how she navigated her world with such ease, as she seemed temporarily unfazed by the chaos swirling around him. Jack glanced down at the diapers nestled in his cart, a tangible reminder of his current position. This simple act could be a mere transaction in her life, but it felt monumental in his. The line between acceptance and defeat growing thinner by the second. "Rachel," he began, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? How could he articulate the struggle festering within him? Before he could finish, she reached for the strap of her handbag, her eyes narrowing momentarily as she took a step closer. "Jack, listen," she urged, her voice steady, but there was an urgency to it that transformed the atmosphere. "This doesn't have to be a defeat. It's not about you failing. It's about recognizing that we all need help sometimes. I'm asking you to trust me, even just a little. Her sincerity pierced through his defenses, and for a moment, he felt the burden of solitude lift slightly. Jack's thoughts turned inward, a swirling tempest of conflict. The potential for support versus the fear of vulnerability. This was an uncharted territory for him. But what if I don't know how to, he asked, the words trailing off into the unification of quiet desperation. Rachel's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the weight she carried mirrored in her expression. She understood the intricacies of survival, how one small gesture could ripple outward, changing lives. You will, she said matter-of-factly. Just take this one small step. Then we can figure out the next together. The clarity in Rachel's resolve nudged Jack closer to an epiphany about his own limitations. Every instinct told him to retreat, to cling to the remnants of pride that felt like safety. Yet, there was a burgeoning realization that every moment he held on to that pride was another moment stolen from Ben's future. The world around them faded into a blur as Jack weighed their choices like scales. Did he want to protect this illusion of strength when it risked his son's well-being? He stood there, grappling with the possibility of God-given momentum if he let down his guards. Rachel's phone buzzed again, jolting him back to the moment. I have to take this, she said, a sheen of regret crossing her features. Please think about what I said. Jack nodded, his heart heavy with the burden of her words. Alone in the aisle now, he reflected on their conversation. The layers of his pride now felt more like chains than a shield. Perhaps the investment she referred to didn't only apply to diapers, but to the very notion of community, of allowing someone beyond even this moment. In that instant, Jack felt a crack in the fortress he had built around himself. He grasped the cart more firmly, envisioning each item as an extension of his willingness to accept help, albeit timidly. He channeled his focus to the struggles ahead, the imminent nights spent figuring out their difficult reality, without shying away from the prospect of partnership. With fleeting determination, Jack pushed the cart towards the checkout. But then, a voice in the back of his mind questioned, could he truly change the course laid out before him? Rachel was right. Every choice pulled at the fabric of who he was and who he could become. Yet, as he scanned the grocery store, a flicker of fear sparked within him. Was this step forward enough to outweigh his history of failures, or would it lead him into deeper chaos? As he approached the register, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. The decision loomed larger than life, demanding eventual confrontation. He just hoped that as he tore down this wall, the echoes of his past wouldn't be too much to bear. The ground shook beneath him in metaphorical anticipation, and suddenly, he found himself seeking a new compass in life. Jack had to address not only the question of helping Rachel, but the implications of his choices and what they might reveal about his own capabilities. As the cashier scanned the diapers, Jack hesitated, the thrill of his newfound direction colliding with the anxiety of the unknown. One flicker of thought crossed his mind as he weighed his options. Could this moment shift the very narrative of his existence? The answer lay tantalizingly close, just out of reach. With the bag diapers in hand, Jack stepped into the wider world outside, caught in a swirl of uncertainty, a future unwritten, but the undeniable urge to challenge his fate lingering in the air. Would he embrace the tides of change, or would the currents of his doubts pull him under once more? Stepping outside the grocery store, Jack inhaled deeply, the crisp air battling the residual heat clinging to him from within. Each breath felt heavier, as if laden with the expectations he hadn't yet fully acknowledged. He glanced down at the bag in his hand, the crinkling plastic almost mocking in its simplicity. This was only the beginning, and already the weight of his decision felt immense. As he walked toward his car, the murmurs of self-doubt encroached on his fading resolve. He wondered how he would tell Ben about the diapers. Would it be something normal, something he could frame as a simple necessity, or would it reveal the cracks in their carefully crafted facade of independence? Jack's mind spiraled with questions unfurling like a scroll. Was this singular act of purchasing diapers a step toward something greater? Or was it yet another futile attempt at grasping at straws, an effort lost in his own tangled mess of personal pride? His foot tapped anxiously against the pavement as he reached the car. The moment he opened the door, a swell of memories flashed through his consciousness. First trips to the park, late-night diaper changes, moments of laughter and tears that had colored the early days with Ben. Each one stood as a testament to his love, but also to his solitary journey. Jack settled into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly as he wrestled with himself. It was time to redefine what fatherhood looked like. The engine hummed to life, but his internal struggles only heightened. He thought of Rachel's words: trust, uncertainty, vulnerability, and he felt them resonating within him. Could he truly trust someone again? Could he allow Rachel's support to permeate the walls he had built? He eyed his phone as it vibrated on the dashboard, a reminder of her presence lingering in his thoughts. The memory of her earnest gaze pulled at him, urging him to contemplate the community she had spoken of, the connections he had long avoided. As he backed out of the parking space, Jack made a decision. This wasn't just about diapers. It was an opportunity to create space for something more profound in his life: a partnership. He recalled the ties he had severed, the chance encounters he had chosen to dismiss. With each turn of the wheel toward home, he felt the reins of control slipping away as he embraced an unfamiliar path. Arriving home, the front door loomed large, a gateway to a world where he had been a steadfast island. But today, there was an inkling of something different. He remembered Ben's laughter echoing through the house, the little ones that had forged holes in his heart only to be filled with love. Perhaps entering into this new chapter would also rekindle that light. Jack unloaded the bag, placing the diapers discreetly on the kitchen counter. As he moved through the house, a transformative determination surged. He was ready to confront his fears, to strip down that fortress of resilience, and let in the possibility of connection. This wasn't only about survival. It was about evolving. That he picked up his phone, Rachel's contact name glaring brightly against the dim light of the screen. What would he say? Would he ask for help outright? Or should he test the waters with something lighter first? Each option loomed larger than the last. Just as uncertainty threatened to paralyze him, a memory ignited a moment of joy shared, an invitation to be vulnerable. Jack exhaled, dispelling the thick fog of anxiety. He had to reach out, to make a connection that went beyond the surface. He knew the moment of truth was upon him. This was where growth began. He scrolled through his contacts again, hesitating over her name. In that vulnerable space, a thought crystallized: what if by just asking for support, he could redefine his relationship with both Rachel and himself? With a deep breath, he tapped the screen. The message was simple but steeped in significance. Hey Rachel, I've been thinking about what you said. Can we talk? As he pressed send, the electricity of that small decision flowed through him, igniting the possibility of a future where he no longer stood alone. Would this decision draw him closer to the help he feared, or would it unravel yet another part of his carefully curated life? A reply chimed in, echoing through the stillness of the house. Absolutely. I'm here whenever you're ready. Jack's heart raced, anticipation mingling with trepidation. As he looked around the dimly lit space, he knew with certainty that the tides had already begun to shift. He was about to embark on a journey toward acceptance, and the depths of that journey would test him in ways he could not yet fathom. Could he truly embrace his own growth within the framework of vulnerability? As he waited for her response, doubt lingered like a shadow, but Jack felt a new courage rising. The moment had come to face not just the past, but the undefined future looming ahead, filled with challenges he was finally ready to confront. The soft vibration of his phone interrupted the silence, pulling Jack back from his swirling thoughts. Rachel's message glowed on the screen like a beacon, her willingness to listen grounding him momentarily in the uncertainty he felt. His heart pounded with the weight of the conversation he was about to initiate. What if her patience was a double-edged sword? Would he expose himself as the flawed, incapable father he sometimes feared he was? He padded to the living room, the familiar scent of old wood and worn books wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. The house felt stark, yet full of echoes, children's laughter that belonged to both the past and an uncertain future. As Jack settled into his favorite armchair, the soft creak felt oddly reassuring. He took another deep breath. Now was the time for honesty. He didn't want to approach Rachel with a rehearsed monologue, but instead allow the conversation to flow. Even in his head, he could feel the barriers he had built start to crumble, exposing vulnerabilities he had long sheltered. He began to formulate his words, mentally rehearsing different approaches. Should he speak of his fears regarding Ben? His inability to balance work and parenting? the guilt that gnawed at him for feeling overwhelmed by the mere thought of asking for help. Each consideration felt like a step into deeper waters where he was both terrified and exhilarated by the prospect of finally being seen. Jack's thoughts snapped back to Rachel. She had been that steady presence, an anchor amid his swirling sea of emotions. Perhaps she would understand the pressure he felt not just from parenting, but from the expectations of being the man who does it all. He breathed deeper, embracing the newfound clarity. Then, the phone chimed again, and another message appeared. How about tomorrow afternoon? We can grab coffee and talk. Tomorrow, he murmured to himself, weighing the implications of yet another commitment in his long list of responsibilities. But beneath his caution lay an undeniable thrill. The potential for understanding, for change, ignited something inside him. He quickly replied, agreeing to the meeting, then pushed aside the phone. The anticipation of the conversation sent his mind spiraling into a storm of preparations. What was he hoping to achieve? Was it time to lay down the facade of independence he had crafted with such care? Was he ready to embrace vulnerability without fearing judgment? As the evening unfolded, Jack couldn't focus on the mundane tasks around the house. The dishes piled high, remnants of the day blurring into a backdrop of noise, as his mind processed the reality of what tomorrow held. He paced the kitchen, each footstep echoing like the ticking of a clock, counting down to a moment that felt monumental. The idea of being open with Rachel both thrilled and terrified him. Could he share his frustrations, his regrets, and, most pressing, his fears about being a father doing it alone? His grip tightened on the countertop as doubts began to creep in again. What if the conversation didn't change anything? What if he unburdened his heart only to find she didn't relate or, worse, felt pity? Jack paused, recognizing the patterns of self-doubt that haunted him. This was the cycle he wanted to break not just with Rachel, but within himself. What if the act of reaching out didn't lead to pity, but to mutual understanding? What if by stepping into the light with his fears, he could light the way for himself and for Ben? His resolve solidified, and Jack took a moment to lean against the countertop, replaying his decision in his mind. Tomorrow wasn't just a conversation. It was a chance for growth, a way to redefine his path as he stepped away from the isolation that had long characterized his life. The sun had set, and the shadows loomed larger around him, but they no longer felt as suffocating. He was ready. He would embrace the light of vulnerability, confident that this was the final step toward a new journey. Just as he had come to grips with that realization, his phone vibrated. Again, Rachel's name lighting up the screen with a casual warmth that tethered him to his commitment. Great. I'll bring some snacks, she typed. Had she sensed the anxiety lurking beneath his words? Was she preparing to offer him support he so desperately needed? The sense of camaraderie in her message felt like a thread stitching the corners of his heart together. Jack's lips curled into a tentative smile. But what he didn't know was that this first step towards openness would unravel deeper currents in his life, unexpected challenges, revelations, and truths he had long buried. As he lay in bed that night, hope warred with apprehension. He couldn't shake the feeling that something significant awaited him in the light of day yet to come. Tomorrow would not only be a conversation, it would challenge everything he believed about connection, support, and the self he thought he could define alone. And as he drifted off, he found himself pondering one question. What else had he yet to discover within himself? Jack woke early the next morning, the sunlight filtering through the curtains and casting a warm glow around his room. It wrapped around him like a soft blanket, yet he felt a tightening knot in his stomach. Nerves coiled tighter as he recalled the coffee meeting with Rachel. Today was about unearthing the contents of his heart, yet uncertainty clung to him like a shadow that he forced himself out of bed, the creative stirrings of anxiety running circles in his mind, and began his daily routine. A shower splashed cold water on his thoughts, momentarily clearing the fog, but as he toweled off, the weight returned with renewed fervor. What if this was all a mistake? What if, in divulging his struggles, he created an emotional distance instead of closeness? Unable to quell the escalating doubts, he reached for his laptop, hoping distraction could provide clarity. Scrolling through emails, seeing the same monotonous requests and reminders related to work, further fueled his discomfort. Each notification felt like a reminder of the man he was expected to be, the dedicated worker, the reliable father, the steadfast friend. But that recognition only deepened the conflict within him. Who was Jack, really? With a sigh, he shut the laptop. There was no escaping reality. It was time to face his fears head-on. After a little breakfast that felt more like a chore than a meal, he checked the clock and realized he had just enough time to gather his thoughts. He grabbed a notebook from the table, the pages blank, a canvas for his potential revelations. As he jotted down bullet points of what he wanted to address with Rachel, his worries about Ben, his sense of isolation, moments when he felt utterly overwhelmed, the cathartic exercise allowed him to see clearly what plagued him. But each scribble dug up deeper questions. Why did he feel the need to present an armor of self-sufficiency? Did that pretense provide any real comfort, or simply trap him in solitude? Each inquiry lifted a veil, revealing layers of shame he had kept neatly tucked away. What if the act of being open didn't just serve as a bridge to Rachel, but a freeway to his self-acceptance? A glance at the clock brought him back to the present. Time had nearly slipped through his fingers. He needed to leave before overthinking set in again. As he drove toward the cafe, the world outside blurred by, a mix of color and motion that felt distinctly detached from his internal chaos. Would Rachel see through his charade? Would his vulnerability liberate him, or expose him to deeper scrutiny? On arrival, Jack spotted Rachel sitting at a table, her casual demeanor a stark contrast to his internal turmoil. Her smile greeted him as if they were old friends picking up a conversation they'd left off yesterday. He returned the smile, despite the anxiety knotting tighter in his stomach. She waved him over, and as he sat down, her presence emboldened him. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he started, his voice wavering slightly, but grounding himself in the moment. "Of course. I brought some pastries. Thought we could indulge a bit," she said, sliding a small box toward him. Her warmth diffused some of the tension thrumming in his chest. As Jack reached for a pastry, he took a moment. It looked so simple, yet it symbolized a crucial opening he hadn't anticipated. Fear mingled with budding anticipation. The act signifies more than mere communication. It was a collaborative ritual of trust. "Can I be honest?" He inhaled deeply, grounding himself in this moment of clarity. But before he could continue, Rachel leaned in, her eyes steady on him. "You can tell me anything, Jack." Her words cut through the suffocating tendencies of judgment he had grown accustomed to, nudging him closer to the edge of the revelations that awaited. What if he could trust her? What if, finally, he could uncover the creative depths of his generosity and vulnerability? As he opened his mouth to speak, a sudden thought flashed through his mind. What if he could expose the truth about his struggles while simultaneously highlighting the need for connection in a world defined by expectations? This wasn't just about him, it was a chance to draw the line back to the humanity everyone shared, including the simplest act of asking for help. But then realization hit him like a lightning bolt. There were layers he hadn't addressed, implications far beyond today's discussion. Rachel's supportive yet curious gaze anchored him, and in that moment, he understood it wouldn't just be about his struggles, but a pivotal moment of moral reckoning. He took a deep breath, the responsibility of sharing his journey weighing heavily on his shoulders. Each word would either strengthen or shift the path ahead. Change lingered in the air, intoxicatingly close yet laden with uncertainty. And as he finally gathered the courage to voice the fears tethering him, Jack couldn't shake one final question. What unexpected truths lay beyond the conversation, waiting to be unearthed? Jack's breath caught in his throat, a myriad of thoughts colliding as he perched on the cusp of vulnerability. Rachel's warm sincerity struck him like a balmy beam of sunlight, yet the shadows of doubt loomed ominously beside it. "I've been feeling overwhelmed," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, his hands trembling as they fidgeted with the edges of the table. He fixed his gaze on her, searching for reassurance in the depths of her understanding. "It's about Ben," and he faltered. "About me, too." Rachel leaned in, her expression an inviting canvas, urging him to paint with bold strokes. "Take your time. I'm here." This was no ordinary conversation. Jack realized the weight of what he was about to share, a raw, unfiltered piece of himself that had been carefully locked away. The words coiled in his throat, battering him with their emotional heft. As if the coffee meeting had turned into a confessional, a pang of guilt surfaced. Who was he to take up Rachel's time with his burdens? But then he felt it, an ember of resolve flickering amidst the anxiety. It was a call to authenticity, to break through the isolating circumstances he had built around himself. I don't always feel like I'm enough. As a father, as a friend, I wear this mask like it's a suit of armor, but it's heavy. I want to connect, but I'm terrified. The confession tumbled out, and as soon as it did, he felt an immediate lift. Liable silences felt purged, and he looked up to see Rachel nodding, her eyes shimmering, his words not just landing, but resonating. Her encouragement sustained him. It's okay to feel that way. So many people wear masks. What you're feeling is normal. Normal? Jack echoed, disarmed. Could that really be true? His conflicts, often laden with shame, suddenly felt less insurmountable, less solitary. Yes, we often think we have to carry the world on our shoulders alone, but everyone struggles. Her voice softened, as if she were extending a lifeline. Each exchange pulled at layers of his guarded identity, scraping back the facade he had created meticulously. He began sharing anecdotal truths. Some days, the weight of parenting felt like it could crush him, while other days, he grappled with the sheer unrelenting expectations of the workplace. And what's worse, I fear that any admission of weakness might shatter the image I've crafted, he confessed, new realizations washing over him. The overly professional demeanor, the facade of invulnerability, it was suffocating. What if showing that you're human is what draws people in? Rachel proposed thoughtfully. Imagine the connection you'd foster just by being honest about your struggles. Her words struck Jack profoundly, each syllable resonating with a hidden truth. He had been so focused on maintaining a polished exterior that he had neglected the power of human connection. The prospect of embracing his imperfections, transforming them into a bridge rather than a barrier, ignited a flicker of determination. Jack observed Rachel's unwavering focus, her willingness to listen luring him deeper into the exploration of his truths. He had spent years safeguarding his feelings behind an armor of professional detachment. But was that really serving him? Or was it barricading him from meaningful connections? Maybe I need to become comfortable with vulnerability, he mused aloud, the statement hanging in the air like a challenge. It was daunting, but the realization felt revolutionary. Rachel smiled, a beacon of encouragement. It's not weakness, Jack, it's strength. That willingness to be open can forge authenticity in every relationship. Fueled by Rachel's insights, he reflected on whether this could translate not just in personal contexts, but in the workplace, too. What if he shared these realizations with his colleagues? What if they too could find strength in vulnerability? The thought was dizzying, a startling juxtaposition to how he usually approached leadership. As their conversation wound down and laughter filled the space, Jack couldn't shake the unease that something monumental was taking shape. A shift was brewing, both internally and externally, bridging the chasm he had long felt. He had begun to scratch the surface of an awakening, yet beneath the surface, other questions bubbled just out of reach. But what lay ahead? Would he embrace this newfound perspective fully, or retreat to familiar territories of self-protection? The space between acknowledgement and action could slice through him, igniting both hope and hesitation. And as they raised coffee cups in a light-hearted toast, Jack's mind was alive with possibility. What if I truly harness this openness to transform not just myself, but those around me? The path of rediscovery beckoned, intimidating, yet irresistibly vital. And in that very moment, a deeper understanding crystallized within him, igniting one final poignant question that lingered like smoke in the air. What would it take to embrace vulnerability in a world that often frowns upon it? The morning sun streamed through the office window, illuminating Jack's desk with an invigorating glow. As he settled in, the lingering warmth of his conversation with Rachel began to pulse gently within him. He realized that tomorrow would mark a significant pivot. He had committed to opening a dialogue about vulnerability in the workplace. That commitment both thrilled and terrified him. He couldn't stop drawing lines between those vulnerabilities and the professional facade he deconstructed over the years. What if sharing his struggles could reshape not just his leadership, but inspire a culture of openness among his colleagues as well? Jack imagined a boardroom filled with nodding heads, not just in agreement, but in understanding. Sitting there, he felt the dichotomy growing stronger. On one side loomed the expectation of corporate stoicism, the armor he had worn with unwavering dedication. On the other, a beckoning depth of authenticity that pulsed in rhythms of humiliation and freedom. He sharpened the pencil in his hand to guide his thoughts, crafting an outline for what he hoped to convey during the upcoming team meeting. He jotted down key points: the burden of men's vulnerabilities in leadership, why admitting fears can build a better team, and the necessity of emotional honesty. Would his colleagues receive this message as he envisioned? Would they, like Rachel, respond with empathy, or would he be met with unease, a deafening silence that screamed of skepticism? Jack's thoughts wrestled with themselves as he sought to find stable ground in uncertain territory. Later that day, the conversation shifted within him. Walking past the conference room, he overheard colleagues discussing another project, their voices a blend of animation and stress. A pit formed in his stomach. He felt the walls he deconstructed around himself start to close in again. Could he really share his vulnerability in this environment? Doubts echoed through his mind. Hadn't he spent a lifetime building an identity based on competence and control? Wasn't he that what leadership demanded? But that awareness, that connection with Rachel's compassion, refused to dissipate. The thought of rejecting vulnerability began to feel more suffocating than liberating. Wasn't he more courageous, he questioned, to reveal the man behind the managerial title? The following morning, as he prepared for the meeting, he felt the weight of the moment settle upon him. He stepped into the conference room and confronted the sea of familiar faces. Each one held layers of expectation. Colleagues, friends, rivals, a web of unspoken judgments woven in the fabric of corporate culture. Thank you all for coming. He started with a tremor in his voice that surprised even him. Today, I want to open up about something that's been weighing on me. The silence was palpable, the air taut with hesitation. Jack could sense everyone's eyes shifting, curiously attentive, yet cautious. He pressed on. I find that as leaders, we often keep a mask in place. We feel this pressure to display strength and invulnerability, but I realize that's not the path to effective leadership. He took a deep breath, and the floodgates began to open. He shared with them his struggles as a father, the moments of doubt, the fears he had as a leader, the moments he felt utterly lost. As he narrated his experiences, he felt a shift occurring in the room, a collective inhalation, a weight being shared like a mutual burden. I want us to be a team that supports one another, he concluded, feeling a peculiar sense of equality and freedom settle in. We're stronger together when we embrace our vulnerabilities rather than hide them. Let us create a space where honesty fosters growth. The silence that followed felt thick, but not oppressive. Eyes darted around the room, and Jack sensed some colleagues wrestling with their own hesitations, a flicker of hope beginning to spark within them. Would they join him in this newfound pledge of vulnerability, or would his words fall flat? The cacophony of uncertainty loomed like an uninvited guest, leaving him anxious about the next steps. A few tentative nods emerged, exchanging glances filled with curiosity and vulnerability of their own. Eager to stoke that spark, Jack prepared to ask for feedback when, unexpectedly, the door swung open, and a familiar face walked in: the company's accountant, Susan, followed by a few others who had clearly been discussing matters in the hallway. Known for her protective demeanor and razor-sharp professionalism, her unforeseen presence was bewildering. "Susan, what brings you here?" Jack questioned, his voice steady, but his heart raced. Her eyes glinted with resolve, an intensity that suggested she too had something monumental to share. "I heard what you said," she replied, taking a definitive step toward the group. "And I believe it's not just you who struggles to show vulnerability. I think we all do." What had started as an exploration of his own vulnerability held the promise of igniting a broader conversation, one he hadn't anticipated. In that instant, Jack realized that this was just the beginning. With Susan's statement hanging in the air, he felt an electrifying anticipation ripple through the room, an uncharted dialogue waiting to unfold. As he witnessed the eyes of his colleagues exhibit a range of emotions from curiosity to introspection, the magnitude of the moment settled upon him. They were on the brink of something transformative. How far would this moment extend? Would it echo in the lives of his colleagues, or would it dissipate like smoke? Jack's heart pounded with thrilling uncertainty. The true test awaited beyond the edges of vulnerability he had just begun to cross. Jack stood at the precipice of uncharted emotion, the air charged with both trepidation and possibility. As Susan's declaration echoed within him, a flood of thoughts surged forth, igniting an internal debate. Was he ready to surrender the polished veneer he had maintained for so long? He glanced around the room, searching the faces of his colleagues for signs of encouragement. They looked back at him, eyes wide and expectant, some even flickering with a hint of vulnerability themselves. It was as if he had thrown open a window, letting in a fresh breeze that stirred the stagnant air of pretense that had long pervaded their interactions. With his heart racing, he felt the tug of authenticity urging him on. What if he could deepen this moment, expand the dialogue? He was tempted to offer specifics, to trade his abstract fears for concrete stories, moments that could resonate more profoundly. Would sharing these experiences allow others to feel more liberated? Let us take this a step further, he said, his voice stronger now, fueled by determination. Why don't we share instances where we felt vulnerable? I think it might help us see one another in a new light. Jack looked to Susan, who nodded, her brow furrowed in a mix of concentration and resolve. We might be surprised by the common threads in our stories, she added, a reluctant smile creeping onto her face. As more colleagues appeared willing to engage, Jack felt an unfamiliar yet exhilarating rush. Colleen from HR spoke first, her voice tentative but resolute. She shared her struggles with balancing personal and professional life, her challenges compounded by the expectations placed on her. Jack listened intently, allowing her words to settle and meld into his own realizations. Next, Andrew from marketing lifted his chin and shared how he grappled with depression during the pandemic, the silence that echoed through his home paralleling the isolation he felt at work. Jack's chest tightened in sympathy as he recognized their shared humanity, the facade of control they both clung to even when struggling beneath its weight. Encouraged by their openness, others began to speak, and the barriers erected around emotional honesty crumbled like dust. Stories swirled in the air, fraught with vulnerability yet illuminated by the strength found in community. Jack felt a cathartic release as he witnessed his colleagues peel away their masks. Inch by inch, he realized how easy it had been for him to dismiss the thought that vulnerability could foster connection and how impactful it was to confront that fear head-on. This transformation wasn't just about him. It was reshaping the collective identity of the team. Each shared story added a layer to their tapestry of understanding. But amid the burgeoning sense of camaraderie, doubt flickered restlessly at the edges of Jack's mind. How would this cultural shift translate into their daily work lives? Would they revert to their old ways once the meeting ended? He caught himself holding on to that nagging fear of the unknown, questioning the sustainability of this newfound openness. Then, unexpectedly, Susan spoke up again. Perhaps it's time we craft guidelines for how we share in the future to ensure this isn't just a fleeting moment. Her suggestion echoed Jack's internal call for structure, a way to implement accountability around their shared vulnerability that he nodded appreciatively, excitement bubbling within him. That's an excellent idea. Yet, before he could elaborate, the door swung open again. Tom, a senior executive known for his stoic demeanor, appeared at the threshold. His presence stilled the room, a momentary hush falling over them. What is going on in here? He asked, raising an eyebrow. The weight of Tom's reputation loomed large, and unspoken tension seeped through the cracks of this emerging dialogue. Jack's heart raced again, but this time it was different. The revelation of vulnerability had lit a fire within him that forced him into the crucible of potential confrontation. Would Tom embrace this moment, or would he dissolve the breakthroughs Jack had been working tirelessly to forge? As the room looked toward Tom, a mix of anxiety and hope hovered in the charged atmosphere. Jack steeled himself, sensing that the trajectory of their collective journey hinged on this encounter. Could this pivot point give rise to burgeoning honesty in a culture long steeped in silence? The moment stretched taut, the future contained within the unspoken response that awaited. Jack found himself at a pivotal cliff, edged with precarious anticipation. Would this be a transformative leap, or would they stumble backwards into the shadows? How would Tom respond, and how would it change everything? Days passed, and Jack felt the weight of change settling around him like a well-fitted coat. The meeting with Rachel had ignited an ember within, culminating in a commitment to foster an environment of openness in the workplace. He saw glimmers of transformation echoing through the office corridors as colleagues exchanged stories and experiences, their laughter now punctuated by moments of vulnerability. Jack stood at the helm of this burgeoning culture shift, filled with both anxiety and resolve. The day he awaited arrived. The rollout of a new discussion initiative aimed at normalizing vulnerability in their professional lives. As he entered the conference room, a blend of nerves and determination coursed through him. Colleagues gathered around the table, their faces etched with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. The echoes of Tom's initial entrance lingered in his mind. Could he embrace this moment? "Thank you all for joining me," Jack started, his voice steadying as he gazed at the familiar faces. "Today, we're going to talk about how vulnerability can lead to deeper connections, both personally and professionally. Acknowledging the resonance of shared experiences, the trials of balancing work and home life. The pressures of high expectations." Jack approached the topic with a raw honesty that felt different from any leadership he had engaged in before. "You might remember the discussion we had the other day," he began, "about our fears and insecurities. It's something we don't often talk about, but it matters. It shapes us." The room was noticeably tense, yet a spark of recognition flickered through the air. Jack pressed on. "I want us to create an environment where we can express our authentic selves, where the act of asking for help isn't seen as weakness, but as strength. Because if we're honest about what burdens us, we can uplift one another." As he spoke, he noticed a change in body language around the table. Colleagues leaned in, an unspoken acknowledgement of their shared struggles passing through the room like ripples on water. He couldn't help but feel a thrill. It was working. One by one, they began to share their stories, each narrative weaving another thread into a tapestry of collective strength. Leah from marketing recounted a time she almost burned out from juggling campaigns and personal issues. Andrew spoke again about his mental health journey, illuminating the unseen pressures they all felt. Each story ignited another, and soon laughter mingled with empathy, a beautiful contrast to the solemnity that had previously defined their workplace. "Vulnerability fosters connection. It humanizes us," Jack stated emphatically, sweat beading gently on his brow as he absorbed the atmosphere shifting like tides. The barriers erected by anonymity began to collapse, revealing layers of humanity beneath. As discussions evolved, the conversation naturally flowed to actionable steps. Together, they crafted guidelines for sharing, creating designated times for open discussions during weekly meetings, ensuring that this wasn't just a fleeting trend. Jack felt an unshakable sense of purpose in their choices. It was as if, in that moment, he had stepped out of the shadows entirely into a brighter, deeper existence. It was empowerment personified. "And what about our leadership team?" Susan prompted, a hint of a challenge in her tone. "Shouldn't we lead by example too? Vulnerability should start at the top." The suggestion resonated within Jack. His stomach flipped with anticipation. He hadn't considered this pathway, this invitation for the upper echelons to join. "Absolutely," he agreed, a surge of excitement surging through him as he realized the implications. "Let us set a precedent. If we want to reshape our culture, it must begin at the top." Tension hung in the balance, yet Jack found his footing. "I'll approach Tom," he stated decisively, the bravery swirling inside him brighter than any doubt. Beneath the camaraderie, there lay a shared, unspoken agreement. This was a critical junction, a point of return to authenticity, and with that intention solidified, they transitioned back out into their work lives, this newfound openness now a fragment of their corporate identity. The evolution was palpable. Conversations transformed from banalities to discussions steeped in shared experience, an unfurling trust rewoven in the tapestry of their professional lives. Weeks turned into months, and as the culture shifted, Jack remained committed to maintaining this safe space. With a renewed zeal, he found himself leading discussions, championing narratives that peeled back the layers of fear and skepticism among his peers. Team meetings birthed not only strategic ideas, but also created an atmosphere of mutual respect rooted in understanding and shared vulnerability. And then came the day when Jack received unexpected feedback from peers. The very team he had feared would judge him rallied behind his vision. A sense of solidarity enveloped him, a pride different from what he felt in past career milestones. It was organic, Flourishing from the soil of authenticity, surrounded by a sense of belonging, Jack proved not only to himself, but to Ben, that leadership could thrive in a space of honesty, that allowing oneself to be seen and known could elevate others in ways he never imagined. He transformed, not just the culture, but himself into a leader worthy of respect, admired for courage. Leaning into vulnerability allowed him to approach his fatherhood with a fresh perspective, one where he could ask for help without the burden of shame that lay in those quiet moments at home. As he played with Ben and navigated the complexities of fatherhood, Jack felt the palpable weight of connection to Rachel. She had been an unassuming catalyst, igniting the flame that would illuminate the path he now walked. Today, as he sat with Ben, playing with the toys scattered across the living room floor, he realized something monumental. His journey was just as much about accepting help as it was about extending it to others. The world felt at his fingertips, filled with endless possibilities, illuminated not by perfection, but rather through the beautiful mosaic of human experiences, all its flaws, quirks, and connections. This new rendition of Jack echoed with authenticity, a harmonious blend of vulnerability and strength and accomplishment that would resonate deeply for years to come. Life had taught him that pride could be a prison of isolation, while vulnerability, when embraced, became the key to true connection. Jack leaned in closer to Ben, their laughter dancing through the room. He savored the joy in the ordinary and channeled the profound essence of personal triumph that lay within each shared smile. Realizing at last, the foundation of true leadership stems from embracing one's humanity, allowing it to rise, fierce and unapologetic. And so the days continued, woven with stories yet uncharted, but now more illuminated than ever before. As he glanced to the window, the sun shone brightly, heralding a new beginning both for himself and those who would continue to learn from him. The transformation had forged a deeper connection, for he had achieved not just growth, but the understanding that asking for help could ultimately create something far greater, a legacy of compassion and an indelible mark on the hearts of those around him. Now was the time to elevate others, to ensure they, too, felt emboldened in navigating their own turbulent seas. Every step mattered. Every story mattered. Jack had stories to tell, and more importantly, he had hearts to touch. Would he share them? Yes, he had made that promise to himself and to those looking upon the horizon of possibility, that if you resonated with Jack's profound journey and want to witness more authentic transformations, you need to subscribe immediately to this channel for the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to ensure this message spreads far and wide. Comment below with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this remarkable finale. Now is the moment to show your support. Let's make these powerful stories a beacon of hope that inspires countless individuals to step into their truth.